Naruto leapt through the trees at a fast pace, aura augmenting his already trained body to distance himself from the two who he knew were following him. He hadn't expected this outcome, but he wasn't surprised by it either. These were huntresses in training after all, and it was also his luck. He felt the hair on his tail bristle and quickly moved as a javelin claimed the few shivering at the close call. They were determined that he'd give them that. Wait! The fawners turned to see a blur past the two initial pursuers, leaving a trail of rose petals in their wake, a semblance. For all the training his master had put him through, Naruto wouldn't be caught that easily, however, but he wouldn't be able to keep the distance through the trees. Instead, he landed on the ground and focused. In bursts of speed, he was off again. The forest became a blur as he cut through the wind at an unnatural pace by normal standards, but not by whomever wielded that semblance. The thought was prophetic, as he would find out a moment later. The sound of a gunshot outran him, and he found himself overtaken by the red streak, who skidded to a stop, coalescing into a human, a girl. They spun around while swinging out their weapon, forcing Naruto to jump into the air and dodge, though his dodged pursuers seemed to have anticipated this, as they ended up rocketing through the air once again farther away. Naruto looked up to see the chaser a few yards away, her weapon trained on him should he try to run once again. Figuring she was a distance fighter, he spun his ninjato around and held it in reverse grip, prepared for a close quarter battle. He wasn't, however, prepared for the question she would ask him. Why? In the pause of surprise, Ruby took the chance to analyze the killer that she had lapped in their game of cat and mouse. Crescent Rose stood at the ready should he move. She could process that it was a he now, and not just some nameless, faceless killer. Wore a thin black hoodie with the right sleeve missing, belts wrapped around the bare arm tightly like the locked strap to her diary. Through her scope, Ruby could make out the faintest hints of words ink tattooed under the leather bindings, though what secret these held she didn't know. More obviously, but no less guardian lacquered plates covered his chest and back. This grew into hammered steel, which was secured on the left shoulder and forearm. A bushy orange belt was the only thing to stand out from the drab color as it wrapped around his waist, though Ruby would swear it actually wrapped itself around his waist. Beneath it was covered by black cargo pants tucked into equally black combat boots that also looked alive, ready to jump into another fight or fast away. Though these details were mostly glossed over, as the hooded girl's attention was consumed by the mask, which was like a black hole, black as night, as if not for the red marking scattering it. Ruby thought she would be sucked in, never to escape. The silver-eyed girl gulped before finding her nerves once again. Why? She repeated the question, as much to hear her own voice as the answer. Ruby looked hollowly at the masked assailant who held the blade at the ready. Her own finger was on the trigger, ready to pull it. He was the target, came the unconvincing response at long last. Do you realize what you've done? I killed him. It was out in the open now. The words seemed to only make it worse for the girl, no longer a one-sided reality. Don't you feel anything? Ruby asked herself, feeling indignant fear and also the slow squelching of her trigger finger. Uncaring for this, the masked killer tilted his head slightly. You took another life. The assailant didn't speak. The silence seemed to only anger the girl even more. Without a further word, the masked mystery turned to run, but the girl wasn't having it. She flipped the muzzle of Crescent Rose around and fired, blasting herself at the murderer in an attempt to incapacitate him. However, Even if his back turned, he was ready and jumped out of the way of the red rocket that was Ruby before going in for an attack of his own. He poised his ninja toe for a strike, but the girl with mixed hair was ready and she quickly used her scythe to blast her way from the slash. Quick to recover, Ruby flipped her weapon and shot off at him. Once again on the attack, in the heat of combat, she swung the large weapon at her opponent without noticing or caring how much strength she had imbued. Similar strikes had bisected beasts several times larger than either of them, so imagine her surprise when he managed to stop the momentum of the swing with a block from his forearm. Not even her dad had managed such a feat. The false masked boy charged at her and cocked his arm. A trench knife had slipped into his open hand while she was busy being stunned. This close, it was clear danger, one that Ruby wasn't having any of. She fired another shot, which propelled her scythe towards the boy, hitting him in the back with its not insignificant mass, or at least that's how it would have gone if he hadn't backflipped at the last second, twisting at an impossible angle to avoid getting reaped. Ruby skidded to a halt with her opponent landing in a crouching position on the balls of his feet. Watching her behind his mask, he placed his ninja toe in its sheath and pulled out a second trench knife, stance cocked, and his fist held aloof as he got ready to attack once again. He wouldn't get the chance, though. Forced to abort, he fell backwards into defensive stance with crossed his arms to block two swords coming at him from both sides. Blake and Power had caught up. Through the concerted effort, he managed to push the two back and leapt into the air to distance himself from the newest threat to his life and, more importantly, his mission. Oh, no, you don't. He barely lifted his unclothed arm to take the brunt of Yang's surprise attack, but was still knocked into a tree by the sheer momentum. Shaking the otherwise debilitating blow off quickly, he looked up, anticipating what was coming next. As his looks would have it, he soon found himself surrounded from four sides by the huntresses, all prepared to take him down, but not out, the fools. "You're surrounded," Pyra declared with an air of authority that echoed through the woods. "Give up peacefully." The killer would do no such thing if his reaching for the weapon was anything to go by. "You're alone here, buddy," Yang scoffed. "There's no way you can take us all." The masked man didn't give anything away, but the air around him shifted slightly, as if disagreeing with the blonde brawler's statement. A moment later, nature unfolded to prove her wrong. "Whoever said he was alone?" Three shadowy blurs landed next to the masked attacker, his allies revealing themselves at last. All of them were cut from the same cloth, both in their garb and the way in which they held themselves, bodies prepared to react. Their black-white mask yet gave away none of their intentions, but if they were supporting their fellow assassin, their motives must have been as black as the fox whose carved snarl now looked more like a smirk. Things were about to get a lot more complicated, it seemed. "The mission has been completed," the black masked killer spoke in a low voice to his comrades. "We have no more reason to be here." They all nodded in understanding. One of the newcomers threw something onto the ground, shrouding them in thick smoke. A moment later, determined not to let this get in their way, the huntresses leapt forward into the haze to take down their designed enemies. However, it was too late. When the smoke cleared, the mysterious masked fighters were long gone, leaving four huntresses frustrated and livid, their victorious examination doing nothing to drain the feeling of resentment nor that of failure. "Damn it!" Yang growled, punching a fist in her hand. Blake sighed in frustration while Pyra gripped her sword tighter. In contrast to these active reactions, Ruby had a faraway look in her eyes, the only thing on her mind being the question she had asked earlier. Why? Her question, however, would not be answered, not today, at any rate. Osmond and Glinda, along with a few other staff members, were in the clearing When Ruby and the others had gotten back, all of their faces were grim and watchful as if waiting for another attack. When Wee's eyes landed on Ruby and the others, she turned towards Ospen and alerted the headmaster of their presence. "Are you all alright?" The gray-haired man inquired immediately, not trusting his surveillance system, which had coincidentally gone out at the same time the masked murderer had shown up. "Yeah," Ruby responded, garnering nods from the others. "Just upset we weren't able to get the bastard." "Language, Miss Zilong," Goodwitch reprimanded as she continued over the other students. Perfunctory reprimanding aside, she was no less concerned. "Were any of you able to get a look at the assailant?" "Look at him," the brawler spoke up in partial disbelief. "We fought him." "We wouldn't have, though, if not for Ruby," Pyra added. "She caught up to him before the rest of us and held him off until we arrived. Though we didn't expect him to have accomplices as well," Blake picked up. "Were you able to get a good look at his face?" "No," Ruby said dejectedly. "That is unfortunate," Glinda sighed. "But I suppose, given everything, it's not a surprise that you can't remember what he looked like even if you had seen him." "No, we didn't just forget," Ruby corrected. "We didn't see it because of the mask they were all wearing." The blonde professor frowned at the explanation. "Masks?" "Yeah," Ruby continued. "They were all wearing white masks, kind of like the White Fang, but with strange markings on them. Although the one that did the deed," Ruby shuddered before pushing forward, "his was black." The explanation had changed something in the air, almost like it had been the other instructors had shown up. Glinda looked over at Ospen with a stern gaze. The headmaster in question frowned at the description. "What?" Ruby asked, having noticed the teacher's reaction. "Ruby, these masks," Ospen spoke, looking at the youngest one there. "Did they look anything like this?" He opened up his scroll and showed the screen to Ruby. She looked at the drawn-up image to see masks that each depicted different animals, but the overall design was the same as the one in question. "Yeah," Ruby nodded. Then one caught her eye. "The one I fought had one that looked like that." She pointed to a mask on the screen. "A fox, but black. Kitsune." Ruby blinked, but realized that the headmaster had spoken once again. "Huh?" "It was a kitsune mask," Ospen sighed. "This is not good." "Ospen, they haven't been active in Vale for years." Glinda hissed, not liking the allusions her superior was drawing. "Who hasn't?" Whist asked, feeling left out. The teachers regarded at the gathering students who were all looking at them with the same question. "Professors?" Pyra began tentatively. "Who did we encounter out there?" Ospen and Glinda shared a conferring glance one last time before Ospen nodded, causing Glinda to scowl. The headmaster approached at his students once again. "It's an interesting year indeed," he mused. "You all encountered an old enemy of huntsmen and huntresses that I thought we abolished in Vale," Ospen explained. Ruby felt a chill run down her spine as she recalled the eyes of the boy, as seen through the slits like gaps in time. "You all encountered assassins,"